The DNA results came on a Tuesday morning, 3 days before my daughter's second wedding. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, actually hot, actually steaming, watching the early light come through the window above the sink, the one that faces the backyard where I used to push her on a swing set we bought the summer she turned 4. I remember thinking about that swing set, for no reason I could explain. The way she'd lean back and look up at the sky and laugh like there was nothing in the world that could ever hurt her. Then my phone buzzed. The email subject line read, "Prenatal Paternity Report. Confidential results enclosed." I set down my coffee. I read it twice. Then I sat there for a long time without moving. I needed to back up. My daughter, my only child, met her fiancé at a charity fundraiser 4 years ago. She was 31. He was 38. A partner at a commercial real estate firm downtown, the kind of man who wore a watch that cost more than my first car and talked about investment portfolios at dinner, like other people talked about the weather. My wife had passed 2 years before that, ovarian cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. It was the hardest thing I've ever survived, and I use that word deliberately. Some people don't make it through grief. I nearly didn't. So when my daughter called me to say she'd met someone, I was glad. I wanted her to be happy. She'd spent those 2 years taking care of me as much as I'd taken care of her, and she deserved something good. I'll call him my son-in-law. That's what he was for a while, legally, even if the title turned out to mean less than I thought. They got married 3 years ago, at a vineyard about 40 minutes outside the city. It was a beautiful day. My daughter wore my wife's pearl earrings. I walked her down the aisle and did not cry until I sat down, and then I cried quietly into a cocktail napkin and hoped nobody noticed. Her maid of honor noticed. She brought me a second napkin without saying anything, and I have always appreciated that about her. The first year of their marriage seemed fine from the outside. The second year I started noticing small things. The way my daughter's voice changed slightly when she talked about him on the phone. Not unhappy exactly. More careful, like she was editing herself in real time. I didn't push. I'd learned from raising her that pushing only made her close up. You had to wait. She'd come when she was ready. She came in October of last year. She drove to my house on a Sunday afternoon, let herself in with her key, and sat down at the same kitchen table where I'm sitting now. She told me that her marriage was over, that she had fallen in love with someone else. A man she'd known for 2 years, a landscape architect named, and I'll just call him her current fiancé for clarity, who she'd originally hired to redesign the garden at their second home up north. I'm not going to pretend I handled it perfectly. I didn't. I said things I later apologized for. I asked if she'd tried counseling. I asked if she was sure. I did everything a father does when he doesn't want to believe his daughter's marriage is collapsing, even a marriage he'd had quiet doubts about. Then she told me she was pregnant. And she told me the baby might not be her husband's. I remember the refrigerator humming. That's the detail I always come back to. The refrigerator humming and the afternoon light going flat and orange through the kitchen window, and my daughter sitting across from me looking like she was waiting for a verdict. I told her I loved her, that I would help her figure this out, that we would get through it. I meant all of it. I still mean it. What followed was, in the politest possible terms, a negotiation. My son-in-law had suspected the pregnancy wasn't his before my daughter even told him. He'd had a vasectomy 2 years into the marriage, something my daughter hadn't known about until she found the medical paperwork in his desk. She confronted him. He admitted it. That conversation apparently ended the marriage more completely than anything else could have. His family got involved quickly. His father is a man I'll call my former son-in-law's father because I don't want to use his name and I don't want to give him more weight than he deserves in this story. He's a man who solved problems with money, which is not always the worst quality in a person, but in this context it felt very cold. They proposed a settlement. My daughter would agree to an uncontested divorce. She would sign a non-disclosure agreement about the circumstances, specifically about the vasectomy, which apparently his family considered a private medical matter and did not want becoming part of any public record. In exchange, they would waive all claims to the shared property, give her the house in the city outright, and pay a lump sum. The lump sum was $400,000. I know that's not $3 million. This is a real story, not a cable drama. $400,000 is still more money than most people see at once in their lifetime, and to my daughter at that moment, pregnant, newly separated, running on fumes, it was significant. She called me from her car after the first meeting with their lawyers. She was parked outside a coffee shop and she wasn't crying, which somehow made it worse. She was just very still and very tired, and she asked me what I thought she should do. I told her to sleep on it. Then I called my own attorney, a man I'd used for estate planning for 20 years, and I asked him to look over the proposed agreement. He called me back the next morning with several observations, the most important of which was this: the NDA as written would prevent my daughter from discussing the circumstances of her divorce with almost anyone, including future partners, including in any legal proceeding, including, and this was the part that made me set down my coffee again, including any proceeding related to the child's paternity or custody. That clause was the tell. If the other side was willing to pay $400,000 to get that clause signed, it meant they were worried about something that money could contain if it was signed away, and couldn't if it wasn't. I drove to my daughter's house that evening. I sat with her for 3 hours. I did not tell her what to do, but I laid out what I understood as clearly as I could, and I told her that whatever she decided, I would stand behind her. She decided to sign. I understood why. She was exhausted. She was 11 weeks pregnant. She did not want a war. She wanted to move forward, and the agreement gave her the resources to do that. I would have made the same choice, maybe, at 32, pregnant and scared and just wanting it to be over. But I asked her, quietly, just once, whether she'd consider getting a prenatal paternity test before signing anything. She said she already had an appointment. The test was done at 14 weeks, a non-invasive prenatal paternity test, a blood draw from my daughter, and a cheek swab from the potential father, processed through a certified lab. Her current fiancé, the man she was actually in love with, was the one who submitted his sample. My former son-in-law by that point had already moved out and retained his own counsel and made it abundantly clear he wanted no part of any paternity process. They signed the divorce agreement 3 weeks after the test was submitted. The $400,000 was transferred. The NDA was signed. My daughter and her fiancé announced their engagement quietly, to family only. They planned a small ceremony, just immediate family, a dinner afterward. Nothing elaborate. She'd done the big wedding. She wanted something that felt like the beginning of something real, not a performance. The ceremony was scheduled for a Friday evening in May. The results arrived the Tuesday before. I opened the email at my kitchen table. The PDF attached had my daughter listed as the mother and her fiancé listed as the tested male party. The results were clinical and exact, the kind of language that doesn't soften anything. The probability of paternity, 0%. I read it again and again. Then I called my attorney. He was quiet for a moment after I explained what I was seeing. Then he said carefully, "Has your daughter seen this yet?" She hadn't. The results had been sent to my email because she'd added me as a secondary contact on the account, back when she first set up the test. She'd been afraid she might be alone when the results came and had wanted a backup. I sat with that for about 20 minutes before I called her. She picked up on the second ring. She sounded like she was getting ready for work, distracted, keys jingling. I asked her if she was somewhere she could sit down. The keys stopped jingling. I told her what the results said. The silence on the other end of the phone was the longest 15 seconds I can remember since the doctor used the word malignant 11 years ago in a room with no windows. "Dad," she finally said. "I know," I said. "What does this mean?" And I told her honestly, I didn't know, but we were going to figure it out. Here is what we figured out. over the next 72 hours. Her fiancé was not the father. Her ex-husband was not the father, and couldn't have been, given the vasectomy, which the test confirmed in the most indirect way possible. Which meant there was a third person. My daughter told me, and I am going to relay this as plainly as she told me, because that is how she needed it to be said. There was a period, about 8 months before she left her marriage, when she had been in a very dark place. Her husband was emotionally absent. She was lonely in the way that married people sometimes get lonely, which is one of the worst kinds. She had briefly, very briefly, reconnected with someone from her past. A man she'd dated in college for 2 years, who had reached out when he saw on social media that she'd moved to a new city. It had been 3 times, over the course of 6 weeks, and then it had ended and she had put it away in a part of herself she didn't visit, the way people put things they don't know what to do with. She had not considered, genuinely had not considered, that there could be any consequence to that calculation. She called him that afternoon. I'll call him the man from her past, because that's all he is to this story. He was unmarried. He was, and this is the word she used, decent about it. Shocked, but decent. He said he wanted to be involved if the child was his. He said he wanted to be involved if the child was his. He said he wasn't going anywhere. I had expected anger, I think, from him, from her fiancé, from everyone. There was some. Her fiancé went very quiet for 2 days, in a way that scared her. I drove over both evenings and sat with them, not talking much, just being there. On the 3rd morning, he came downstairs before she was awake and found me in their kitchen making eggs, and he sat down and we talked for a long time. He was not a man who spoke easily about feelings. He had grown up in a family that communicated mostly in practicalities, but that morning he told me that he loved my daughter, that he had known from the beginning that the situation was complicated, and that complicated had never scared him. He said the child would be raised knowing both biological parents, if that was what everyone wanted, and he would be there regardless of what a test said about chromosomes. I am 64 years old. I have known a lot of men. I can count on one hand the ones who showed up the way he showed up in that kitchen. The wedding happened on Friday, as planned. 12 people in my daughter's backyard. Her fiancé's sister came from Portland. My sister came from Tucson and sat next to me and held my hand during the vows, which was more than I can say I deserved, given how little I'd called her that year. A neighbor officiated. My daughter wore a simple cream dress and looked more like her mother than she ever has in her life, and I was not expecting that. And it leveled me. The man from her past was not there. He and my daughter had agreed to a paternity confirmation at birth and a co-parenting arrangement drawn up by a family attorney. A different family attorney. One my daughter chose herself this time. Her ex-husband had been notified of the situation by her lawyer in the most formal and minimal terms required by their agreement. His family's response was silence, which was the clearest measure of them I'd ever gotten. After the ceremony, during dinner, my daughter found me on the back steps where I'd stepped out to get some air. She sat down next to me the way she used to when she was 15 and had something on her mind she didn't know how to start. "You doing okay, Dad?" she asked. "Mostly," I said. We sat there for a minute. The yard was lit up with string lights. Her fiancé had put up himself the day before, running them between the fence posts and the old oak tree. They looked like something from a long time ago, and also like something very new. "I'm sorry," she said. "Not for anything specific, just the overall weight of the past several months, I think." "Don't," I said. "I made a mess." "You made a life," I said. "Messy's part of the deal." She laughed a little, a quiet laugh, nothing fancy, the same laugh she had when she was little, and I said something that surprised her. I thought about her mother. I thought about how much she would have struggled with this and how completely she would have come around, because she always came around. She was better at love than I am, more efficient with it, less tangled up in how things were supposed to look. I thought about what she would have said, sitting here on these steps, and I was pretty sure it was something close to what I just said. Messy's part of the deal. The baby is due in late summer. They've moved into a bigger place. Still in the same neighborhood. Still close enough that I can get there in 15 minutes if someone needs me. Her fiancé has already put together a crib. He sent me a photo of himself sitting in the middle of the floor, surrounded by hardware and instructions, and a look on his face like a man who has made a series of choices and stands behind all of them. The man from her past has been in touch. He came to the city for a weekend last month, and my daughter and he had a long, difficult, ultimately okay conversation at a coffee shop near her office. She told me about it afterward, standing in my kitchen, the same table, the same light. She said he seemed good, that he was trying. My ex-son-in-law has not reached out. I don't expect him to. The settlement holds, the NDA holds, and whatever feelings he has about all of it are his to carry. I don't waste much energy thinking about him. He made his choices a long time before any of this happened. The quiet, private choices that set the stage for everything else. And the rest of us have been working around them ever since. I wake up most mornings now and make coffee and sit at this table for a while before the day starts. It's a habit from when my wife was alive. She was the one who needed that quiet time. And I kept it up after she was gone because it was the closest I could get to her in the early hours. I think about her a lot. I think about my daughter. I think about a grandchild I haven't met yet, who is going to come into a situation that is complicated on paper and, I suspect, will be loved in ways that have nothing to do with paper at all. I am 64 years old. I have buried a wife. I have watched a marriage fall apart and another one begin in the same yard. I have gotten phone calls that rearranged everything I thought I knew. Here is what I know now that I didn't know before. Documents matter less than people think. Money matters less than people think. Biology matters less than people think. Though it matters, it just doesn't decide things the way we expect it to. What decides things is who shows up, who sits in a kitchen at 7 in the morning and makes eggs, who comes down the back steps to ask if you're okay, who picks up a phone on the second ring even when she sounds distracted because she made her father a secondary contact on a lab account because she didn't want to be alone. I deleted the original email, not to hide it. There's nothing left to hide. Just because I didn't need it anymore. It had done what it came to do. I picked up my coffee, finally hot for once, and I watched the light move across my backyard, and I thought about a swing set I should probably have taken down years ago, but never did. I think I'll leave it up a little longer. I've been sitting with this long enough now that I can say it without my voice catching. Nothing about the last year went the way any of us planned. Not my daughter, not her fiancé, not me. And yet, somehow, we're all still standing. That's not luck. I don't believe in luck the way I used to. I believe in choices. The ones we make when no one's watching, and the ones we're forced to make when everyone is. My former son-in-law made a choice years before any of this came to light. He chose to have a procedure without telling the woman he'd married. He chose silence over honesty, control over partnership. And I think he told himself it didn't matter, that it was a private medical decision that she'd never need to know. But choices like that don't stay contained. They spread. They shape the air inside a marriage until the air runs out. What happened to my daughter wasn't a sudden disaster. It was the slow accumulation of a man who lacked the basic integrity to be honest with his own wife. The collapse looked sudden from the outside. It wasn't. My daughter made choices too. Some of them I didn't agree with. Some of them she'd probably make differently now. But here's what I watched her do in the hardest months of her life. She didn't run from it. She sat at my kitchen table, and she told me the truth, all of it, even the parts that were hard to say and harder for me to hear. That took something. It took the kind of clear-eyed courage that isn't loud or heroic. It's just the willingness to look at your own mess without flinching and say, "This is where I am, now what do I do?" That's not a small thing. I raised her, so maybe I'm biased. But I watched her think her way through a situation that would have broken a lot of people, and she didn't break. She bent, and she straightened, and she made a plan. The man who sat across from me in her kitchen making eggs at 7 in the morning, her fiancé, that's the one who surprised me most. He had every reason to walk. No one would have blamed him. Instead, he stayed and he thought clearly, when clarity was the hardest thing to find, and he chose what he wanted instead of letting circumstance choose for him. That's a kind of intelligence I respect more than book sense or business sense. It's the intelligence of knowing what actually matters and not letting fear of complication talk you out of it. What I keep coming back to is this. The people who made it through this year with their dignity intact were the ones who told the truth, who thought before they acted, and who held on when the easier thing would have been to let go. And the people who didn't make it through, not in any real way, were the ones who treated honesty as optional and other people as problems to be managed. That's not a lesson I learned from a book. It's what I watched happen in my own family, at my own kitchen table, over bad phone calls and early mornings in one backyard lit up with string lights on a Friday evening in May. I'll take it.